One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. I have a dream. I got a dream. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. I have a dream.
The Nation's website, refugees is listed alongside topics like poverty as a global issue. However, the identification of refugees and asylum seekers as a social injustice is far more ambiguous. This is in fact the group of people who are the subjects of the social injustice, with the injustice they face being the treatment they receive trying to escape and once at safety. This injustice is a trend, not a glitch. Education has the potential to be a vehicle of social justice, as it not only has the power and position to change ideas, but to minimise negative post-migration factors and create a future for refugees that the news fails to follow. However, although education can have an impact on the dominance of this injustice in society, this injustice too influences various aspects of education from practice to products.
It's clear that for refugee and asylum-seeking children in the UK, there is a huge academic impact. The UN Refugee Agency reported that the number of refugee children in school at a primary level rose to 63%. This is in conjunction with the law from the UN Convention on the Right to the Child, which protects refugee and asylum-seeking children in the UK. It is important to consider the question, is an achievement by a refugee child the same as the rest of the class? Kandappa identified that previous education may be limited due to factors out of the child's control, for example war. This could cause the child to be behind their native peers in the class, so an achievement for a refugee child may be different in comparison to their peers. Silence and trauma faced by the refugee could also cause a delay in progress or lack of attendance, so even just a child attending school could be seen as an achievement. However, it is easy to believe that all children from refugee and asylum-seeking backgrounds have previously been poorly educated. Some of these children had a good level of education in their native country. So it is important to consider the educational background before changing what an achievement looks like to a refugee child. A likely language barrier should be considered when the refugee child joins the rest of the class. The NALDIC identified that schools play a critical role in supporting children with EAL. Culture shock can cause a child's sense of security and self-image to be thrown in the air, which could cause the child to fall behind. The DCSF found that for EAL children, talk and collaboration are essential parts of effective teaching and learning and in developing secure language acquisition, which goes hand in hand with academic development with an inclusive curriculum as the context. This enables refugee children to feel confident when speaking English, and they feel they have a purpose in the classroom and can enrich the life of the school community and learning environment. Arnold and Pinson believe that education provided to a refugee and asylum seeker children by teachers will solve all setbacks that these children face. The setbacks need to be corrected, and the educational achievement will be a result of this. This ideology agrees with the concept of need. However, in the DFE's Unlocking Talent and Fulfilling Potential, it states that equality of opportunity starts with education, and that there are many other factors, including social, emotional and economic well-being, that can give refugees and asylum seekers equality of opportunity.
Policies and frameworks are a means of representing society, and so with the intensifying climate of the refugee crisis over recent years, the need for policies does not change, but the demographic which policies represent does. With the UK as a democracy, it is not enough to accept refugees into the UK in order to maintain and improve our policies as sufficient, or as Arnott and Pinson feared, we will see them as refugees before children, this being detrimental especially in schools. A key policy in education, the national curriculum, demonstrates educational equality, the equal treatment with potential for unequal outcomes, as statutory guidance indicates what all students should be taught. However, in practice, the presence of refugee children in our classroom may demand a focus on need over equality. Extra provisions may be required before interaction with such frameworks. As a result, it could be suggested any gap between theory and practice is due to government ideology being distanced from how the refugee crisis is impacting upon the educational system. This puts teachers in a difficult position. Whilst they have a professional obligation outlined in the teacher standards, they have a personal and moral obligation too. Another aspect of policy which impacts upon the education of this particular group is the language exercise in policies. From national policies such as processing children's asylum claims to local organisations like CRAM, there is a dominant use of exclusive language, like the term UASC. To increase inclusivity, the term separated children has been suggested to remove the social associations that are attached to refugees and asylum seekers and better anticipate the range of circumstances and the product of the crisis, a vulnerable child. Policies on a national and local level still appear to lack a sufficient grasp on the extent of the crisis. For instance, in Canterbury from 2017 to 2019, the percentage of minority ethnic groups in primary schools rose 0.8%, and in 2019, 81% of primary pupils were white British compared to a 66% national average. How can we enforce national policies when it does not apply in the same degree to all?
Social media can have a major impact on the way that refugees are portrayed to the individuals in the home country. This is due to newspapers including mainly negative headlines and stories, leading us as the readers to believe these things are true. Newspapers and social media sites are there for everyone to see and have their opinions on. This can have an impact on the refugees that enter the country, as these opinions aren't always positive. A common opinion stated by Nadia Nafi towards refugees is that they are dehumanised on social media sites by individuals who are against their arrivals in the country. This can have an impact on the refugees, as it can make them feel they are unwanted in this country. To follow on from this, the immigrants and refugees that are children can also suffer from these negative mindsets of these individuals on social media. Children are able to read these opinions that are said about refugees and are therefore able to absorb it and portray it in their own opinions towards other children in their class in the school setting. This can therefore affect any refugee children that hear these comments, have an impact on these children's education. To be a refugee and to come to another country is a difficult task, and Armstrong states that there are certain qualities that they have to build up to be here. For example, this could be courage and resilience. These qualities are something they could offer us, so shouldn't we as individuals focus on putting more effort into solving issues that force them here rather than creating new barriers for them? In a recent BBC News report, a BBC correspondent stated that refugees are not stopping, don't want to help, and for them it is a desperate race to the UK. This shows how desperate these individuals are to get to safety, which is something as a country we're able to offer them. Therefore, shouldn't we be promoting this rather than using social media to spread negativity? These individuals are here for democracy, education and safety, whereas various media suggest otherwise. The UN Convention Article 29 believes that education is the development of the child's personality, talents and mental and physical abilities to the fullest potential. All of these can be affected by the negative comments made online via social media, therefore having impact on a refugee child's education. Having negative opinions stated online for everyone to see can affect a child's confidence and ability to build relations with other children. As the UN Convention suggests, a holistic approach to education is not just what the children are being taught, it's also the development of the individual, which is likely to be affected through people's negative views on social media. This will also have an impact on the teachers who have to challenge this in their classrooms. It should be incorporated into the intellectual curriculum, the need to be inclusive so that all the children have the same opportunity to feel valued in the classroom. A school environment should be a safe place for a child, so why are we creating barriers through social media to hinder these children's progress?
There are a variety of ways that refugee children may present in class. Some of these include having a lack of English language ability, different accents, and potentially a lack of resources such as uniform, stationery, and clean clothes, all making them extremely vulnerable and potentially susceptible to bullying. A study by UNICEF in 2016, based in Italy, found that 17.9% of migrant and refugee children compared to 11.4% of other children were victimised in school, providing evidence that refugee children face a higher risk of bullying. Arriving in a new environment like school can be a real culture shock to a refugee child. It can make them feel isolated, anxious, and like they're different to the other children. In addition to this, the experiences they have faced to get to the new country could cause their childhood to suffer, affecting their abilities to play with other children comfortably and also their reading and writing skills. If they've been separated from relatives, they may face attachment issues and cling to teachers. These are potentially long-term impacts on the child, and as teachers we must consider ways to help aid the emotional well-being of the child. Educating the class will also aid this massively, as stigma is built from a lack of education.
I think it is important that a new refugee child who has just arrived at the school is put straight into a classroom. Being in a classroom will give the child a structure, which is something they're unlikely to have had before. These children may have limited English, therefore using picture cards to show and explain the daily routine will allow the children to see what is expected of them. They'll be partaking in the same activities as the other children, making them feel included in this safe environment. If they were to be kept from the classroom, they will not be introduced to the children, therefore won't be able to build these important relationships. It will also make them feel different to the other children, as they'll be asking why they can't be included in what the other children are doing.
I believe no, because it needs to be established at what point their development is at and understand and familiarise themselves with the system. If the child is thrown straight in, then it will cause confusion for that child, and the teacher may be drawn away to give one-to-one support, which could segregate the child further rather than integrating them and including them in the system.
I agree that it is important. Teachers are ultimately only human at the end of the day, and you can promote positive values such as empathy and confidence in order to provide support for the refugee children. This topic is an extremely emotional one, which would impact even the most experienced of practitioners.
No, I believe that teachers need to be professional in their role whilst following the teacher's standards. Teachers should have an impartial view in the classroom and treat all students equally and think about the whole class and not just single identified children. As teachers in a classroom, we need to remember who is at the core of everything we do, the children. It's hard to say the least, the urge to take on the fight for social justice ourselves. However, we need to remember why we are here and what we can do.
As teachers in our own practice, we may not be able to eliminate this social justice for this particular group. However, we can eliminate this injustice's existence within our own classrooms. Teachers should be aware of all the children in the class and the certain needs and background that each child has. Therefore, the teacher should be aware of a child that has refugee status. However, this should not in any way dominate their approach to that child, nor should it damage the relationship they have with that child. Being too dominant in this field can shift the way the child respects you as an adult and in the long run have a negative effect on the child. As teachers, we need to remember why we are doing this and the power we have that can affect each child's chances of receiving the education they deserve and are desperate for. We should be fighting their barriers and not let anything come at the expense of that.